Say hello. Hi. You're such a smiler. Hey guys. So welcome to my second video for my new YouTube channel. And I promise as I go I'll get better, and the quality will probably get better hopefully as I go as well. So anyway, yeah, I don't know if you guys remember from the last video, but this is Jaden. He's 5 months and growing so quickly, and he's such just a happy boy. I thought for my first video, I would just talk about my testimony and how I came to know Jesus. I thought that would be the most appropriate way to kind of start off the second video and go from there. I have a bunch of topics that I wrote down that I'd love to just get to and make videos about, but for now I think I'm just going to go with this one. Now, I would record upstairs where I have like my ring light and all that other stuff, but for the sake of the fact that like my toddler's sleeping, I'm gonna do it down here. So, my name is Claudia, and I'm married to a wonderful, handsome Asian guy who's from China, but he immigrated here a few years ago, and he took business school, and we were best friends for quite a while. And then we got married and had 2 kids, and we may or may not have another one. We don't know yet. Anyway, so I'm going to try to condense it as best as possible. So I was raised Roman Catholic, and I always knew about God, but I guess it's different to know about God and really know God on an intimate level and truly know what it is to be in a relationship with Him, to pursue Him. I always had this concept of, Catholicism and Christianity, they're all the same thing. What's the difference? And I was very used to having the priest read us the Bible. Like, only the priests read, the Word of God, and they have the wisdom to understand. They've been ordained by God to be able to open up His Word and translate it to us in a comprehensible way. But as the years went on, my parents stopped attending. My dad's an atheist. My mom still believes in God, but doesn't see the need to go to church. My brother, I'm not really sure where he stands. My sister is into sort of like new age stuff. So me and my twin sister were the only Christians in the family. And I remember my first Christian experience was when we were 16 and we were having some family problems at home, and we wanted an excuse to be out of the house. So we ended up getting invited by a friend who I'm still friends with today. Actually, she has a daughter who's just a week older than my oldest son, Levi, and she introduced us to a Christian church. And I thought to myself, yeah, like, let's just go, like, anything to be away from home for a little bit longer. And so we went, and I just remember walking in, and already the atmosphere felt so different. It was incredible, and the music was so much different too. It was just the whole environment, the atmosphere. It was very, if you contrast it to a Catholic church, it's just, oh my gosh, the difference is unbelievable. So I could already feel the difference walking in, and I thought, wow, like, there's something different about this place, about these people. And anyway, it was funny because halfway into the second song, I believe, I just started bawling my eyes out, and I turned to my friend and I said, oh my gosh, like, what's happening to me, other than the fact that I was emotional through family problems. But it was just like this presence washed over me, and I couldn't explain it. And I'm like, what in the world, So then after service was over, I just went home thinking to myself, like, gosh, like, what in the world was that? That was so beautiful. It was wonderful. Everyone, now don't get me wrong, and God bless her heart, I know a woman from the old Catholic church that I used to attend who is just so in love with Jesus. She's just so on fire for Christ, and she loves Him, and she has such a reverence and a humble attitude in serving Christ. And so when I say this, I know many people who are Catholic and they attend Catholic church. They just need to have their eyes open to a lot of the things within that religion that are very idolatrous and among other things that are just wrong, especially when it comes to things like being forgiven by priests. I remember just carrying such a load of burden within me because I'd be like, oh, I've sinned and it's just accumulating, and I have to wait when I'm available and have time to go and get it, get it forgiven by a priest in a box. And that's not to, I pray that God will continue to work in the hearts of people in the Catholic Church and open up their eyes. But again, this is just my personal story. So moving forward, I didn't necessarily really attend a Christian church until a little bit, a few years later. I want to say maybe 2012, 2013. I can't really remember exactly, but I knew it was this Christian church who, it was my first introduction into really getting involved with it, and I joined a youth group. But looking back now, I realized how many problems there are in youth group settings in general. The youth are just not used to being in a setting where like they ask difficult questions and they learn how to defend their faith in difficult topics of the Bible. And I think, and obviously there has to, you want to approach it in the right way, but I think that our youth are being bubble wrapped far too much when it comes to certain biblical things. And then of course they're setting them up for failure in the future. And finally, and mind you, I was never like a major partier. I was never really into that kind of stuff. I was always just obsessed with horses. It was just God and horses, it was just, I just want to have my relationship with the Lord and be at home and do what I can to be a good person, and or at least what I thought my standards were of a good person at the time, and just I was obsessed with horses. So I was riding for about 10 years, but then I had to put a pause on it essentially. And hi sweetie, I had to put a pause on it essentially because of finances, and I just remember being so heartbroken, and I was in and out of part-time jobs and trying to save up and do all these things. And that's when once my sister and I turned of age to go out and party and drink and stuff, I was not really initially into that up until I met this one guy who I started dating. He was my first like official boyfriend, my first ever relationship, and it didn't go that great. Like at first I was, infatuated, and I was like, this is my first relationship. This is great. This is amazing. But it was just very up and down. He became very possessive. There was a lot of certain behaviors that I started noticing him that I really disliked. Hi, you're so cute. My goodness, you're so distracting. And yeah, it was just a possessive nature that he had. He would harp on people that I hung out with. Not just people that I hung out with, but, the clothes that I wore. And I started realizing, my gosh, like, this is just stupid. And to try and condense the story just slightly more, there was, at one point, I just got pressured into going to make a 5-hour drive to see him, and I was very tight on money. I had, like, no job at that time. I only had whatever was left in my wallet, and I was trying to make things work, and I was in a very dark point in my life, and I was starting to give up hope, and it was just constantly struggling. And I just wasn't sure when things were going to get better. So I went to go see him, was there. It was a waste of time. Came back. It was a massive snowstorm. I was still fairly new to the road. And I almost got killed by 2 transport trucks on the road. And I just remember calling 911. They sent me a tow truck. I stayed in a motel. Within that time period, I broke up with him because he obviously showed me that his entrepreneurial endeavors were more important than me. And so I just said, you know what, like, we're done. That's it. I'm just so finished with this. And so after that, I just remember being so alone in those 24 hours, waiting to just get picked up to get driven home, or towed to my godmother's place in Toronto, which was about an hour and a half away or so. And then when it was safe enough, I would drive back home. And I just took a dive. I took a dive into a dark, dark pit. I just started being in and out of relationships a lot, premarital sex, just a lot of immorality, dressing provocatively. I started drinking, trying out drugs. And by drugs, I don't mean like mollies and shrooms and all that stuff. It's just more of like just smoking weed, which I didn't like it. Like, I mostly just did it because it was a social thing. I got drunk because it was just a numbing effect for me, emotionally and mentally. So I wouldn't have to think about it. It would drag me at least to get to the next day, and and I repeated the process essentially in between work. And at this point, I had found a job at a bar downtown. And at first I started off as a server, didn't like it, didn't work out. So then I switched to coat check and door person just up until I was able to get my security license. So then I became a bouncer. Within this time, I was still in and out of relationships, but then I met this one guy who was a drug dealer, and yeah, looking back at it now, and I say that, but it's true. Like the fact is like he dealt drugs, and it was a very difficult, sticky situation, and I was very attached to him, very infatuated. What I thought was me being in love with him at the time was just not me being in love with him at the time. So we just have this warped idea of what love really is. But anyway, so we were just in this thing for about 6 months. And in between this whole time, I was working security, still going out with friends. That was my life. You know, I did my thing. I went to the mixed martial arts gym that I still train at today, which I actually met my now husband, which is great which is funny because we've been best friends for 5 years. And it's like, sometimes you just, you know, your whole future just sitting right under your nose, sometimes with somebody that you may not even realize up until God opens up your eyes and your heart. But he had to go through a process in his own with his walk with Jesus. So God has a perfect timing for everything. And even though we get off course, God can redeem it and reroute us and still bring us back to where we need to be. But anyway, so at one point, you know, he had moved back home to be with his mom and help her out and stuff. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, my gosh, like, how is this going to work? Because I was grappling at straws here to make it work. Like, I just didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to be out of a relationship. And I was constantly playing tug of war with the Lord. And I could feel him really trying to escalating his prodding within my spirit to get my attention. And so then when he did move back, we were still trying to make it work for at least, I want to say another month or so, tops. And at one point, I think when things really started escalating, in between this time period, I had a friend of mine who asked me to attend church with her and said, sure, like, I can go to church with you, why not? But of course, I was still very lukewarm, still very stagnant and complacent in my walk as a Christian. And so I started attending church, but still worked. And then we met a couple old friends that we hadn't seen for a while, you know, reconnected with them, started attending their home church fellowship groups twice a week. And I just remember one night, like, thinking as God was starting to slowly get my attention again and working within my heart to soften it up enough for me to just come to the end of myself so that I could surrender to him and really submit to Christ again. One night I had one of the bouncers ask me to come and help him with a female patron. And at first she complied and she was fine and she was very, you know, she went voluntarily, but halfway out the back door, she just turned violent, started thrashing about, ended up punching me in the face. So I already knew I was going to end up with a black eye. But again, we weren't allowed to fight back. So I said, okay, whatever, like, I'm just going to take the blow. And I restrained her arms behind her back. And somehow she managed to slide one of her arms free enough that she, like, grabbed my hair and yanked it really hard. And I don't know what came over. I swear it was just demonic because I just saw red and I completely got livid and just went off on her, you know, and I just violently started kneeing her in the face and basically all the training that I could try to, like, muster up within my muscle memory to attack her and defend myself from MMA. I went at it, you know, so I was, like, kicking her in the face and kicking her in the ribs and it was so ugly. It was horrendously ugly. I hate it. Like, even thinking back now, like, I hate it. But I remember, like, after my manager pulled me off of her and I was, like, screaming at her and cussing her out. And, you know, back when I still had such unwholesome speech within my mouth and just this anger that washed over me that I couldn't control. It was so hard to rein it back in. And I went back inside, you know, went back to my post, and all I could think within my heart was, Lord, like, I don't like the person I'm turning into. Like, you need to do something. You need to save me. Please get me out of this. And funny enough, he ended up, funny enough, my parents needed somebody to house sit while they were away for about 3 to 4 weeks to Portugal. And I said, sure, like, I'll house sit for you. But God just worked it out because I was going to be left to my own devices. I was going to be left all alone. And the very day that they left, my drug dealing boyfriend broke up with me. And I was devastated and heartbroken, and I was just sulking completely. And it was awful because pretty much, I want to say a few days, a week or so later, I was in the hospital thinking I was having a miscarriage, but it wasn't. It turned out to be a completely different issue altogether. But there was that scare, and then another week later, the police show up at my house to say that there's a man with a loaded AK-47 running amok in the neighborhood, jumping people's backyards, to be careful, to lock up, not to open up for anybody. And so here I am alone in this dark house, just sitting quietly, thinking to myself, my gosh, like, could this get any worse? Like, it's just one thing after the other. This is horrible. Like, I'm so done. And I was slowly escalating to that breaking point, you know, the straw breaking the camel's back moment. And I did reach it at one point when I just, one night I couldn't take it anymore. And I remember turning on worship music, and there was this one song that I can't really remember very well. It might have been like Cornerstone, the song Cornerstone. And I just broke apart in the living room floor of my parents' home, crying out to God and saying, okay, you know what? I'm a mess. I'm broken. I can't do this by myself anymore. I really need you. And I'm giving you everything. I'm surrendering everything over to you. And I just kept crying out to Jesus. And I just felt his presence. You know, I just felt like I was on the floor, up against the wall, leaning, and I could just feel his presence there. So tangible, and just the reassurance and the comfort that came over me. And at that moment, I felt like the Holy Spirit came within me and things started to make sense. You know, it was that moment of realization, revelation, of coming to the end of myself, humbling myself enough that, like, you know, I completely purged the pride out of my heart within that moment and realized how much I need my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and how powerful the gospel truly is, and how alive and active it really is in our everyday life. And so from that, I moved on to quitting my job. I mean, it took me a while because that was the only income coming in on a time where I was living on welfare with my sister and my other roommate, and we were all living together and scrabbling by. But it's, you know, we somehow made it work, but God provided, and he was faithful. And looking back now, like, since giving my life to Christ, I got rebaptized and went to a discipleship training program in Kansas City for 6 months. Had a lot of it. That in itself is its own experience, which I will definitely do a video on, because there was a lot of great things, but also a lot of bad things, especially when we're getting into the very dangerous charismatic movement, you know, word of faith movement, like faith healers and stuff like that, which can make it all the word, like, you have this dynamic in a Christian organization or institution or what have you, and there's so many wonderful, beautiful people so genuinely on fire for God, but the ideologies, their doctrines are so distorted and warped, and it's very subtle. And so you really have to know and be grounded in the faith and in the Word of God, and know your stuff to be able to, like, highlight it and pinpoint it out, and be able to discern it, right? Which at the time I was still learning and growing as a Christian, still am, always are, in the sanctification process for a lifetime until we get to heaven. But anyway, yeah, and then when I came back, I started dating. So I went in January of 2016, and as of February, my husband and I started dating at that time, and we were courting, but then we had a few issues. Again, it goes back to just the messed up, cultish environment that was in Kansas City at the organization I was in. But when I came back, God redeemed it. And I'll recount that whole experience in its own video, but we got back together, and a couple months later he proposed, and then 4 weeks later we felt like the Lord was saying, just get married now. And then 6 months later we had a Christian-based, like, just inviting friends and family for this big celebration for our wedding. So technically we had 2 weddings. And then, of course, but after we got legally married in 2016 in September, 5 months later I got pregnant. So it was just one thing moving along after the other. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. And just to see how God was redeeming it. Now, there was still a lot of mess to be spiritually cleaned up within me. And that's okay. And God's always working. But yeah, that's my testimony. That's like the short, condensed version as much as I can. There's still a lot of details, but I feel like if you guys would love to hear some more about, you know, my story with my husband and my kids, and again, my experience with that cultish, like, Christian environment up in Kansas City, just let me know. I'd love to do a video. But the Lord is faithful, and I would love to hear your guys' testimonies in the comments section, or just how you came to know Christ and what you guys think. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I hope to continue making more. He's chewing my thumb. Some more videos for you guys, and I'm really excited. I'm really excited to just share my journey as a mom and faith and just my life, and just I want this all to glorify God. So God bless all of you that are watching. Bye.